Let's chat. Bipolar disorder. What is it? Bipolar disorder have periods of extreme, intense moods. The duration is 7 days to months if left untreated. These are distinct moods that are separate from their normal baseline. Baseline is what the person would be normally, a normal mood. And these moods are elation and depression. They're distinct sections of time when the person experiences clinical depression, mild, moderate, or severe, and a level of elation that is either hypomania or mania. People think that bipolar is a disorder where someone goes from happy to sad. That's not true. Or their moods are all over the place. That's also not true. These are distinct periods of illness. They have a time duration and a noticeable, on all spectrums, socially, in their workplace, in their personal lives, in their financial choices, their energy expenditure, their perception of life, on all realms, and noticeable outside of them. Often not noticeable to them, especially in hypomania. It's a brain illness. Like schizophrenia, it's considered organic, not an illness of the person, not an illness of the mood, that it comes from the brain. And they have episodes of sickness and episodes of wellness. When they're at baseline, they are well, and they're capable of being sad, and they're capable of being happy, and they're capable of being moody and irritable when they're a normal person, when they're at baseline. Everyone's capable of being up and down. This is not bipolar. Bipolar has episodes of mood dysfunction. And let me see here. Get some paper. I should have drawn this ahead of time. But it's a pajama chat, so I didn't think. This is baseline. That's where everybody is. And everybody can kind of go up or down along that baseline. But generally, they're the same individual with the same values, interests, beliefs, activity levels, sleep. All of these things stay the same. Someone with bipolar does this. Now the level sections are when they're at baseline. Anything below or above baseline is a mood episode. The person with bipolar disorder doesn't necessarily have the same heights of highs nor lows of lows when they are, hi kitty, when they are experiencing their illness. Each and every time can be totally different. The high of a bipolar illness episode is called hypomania or mania. Hypomania, the person seems to function extraordinarily well. They just seem to be the best version of themselves. Ideas come to them quickly. They are extra social. They are extra decisive. They have a lot more energy, a lot more focus and motivation without effort. Everything just comes effortlessly, and they're not prone to notice that they have an illness, especially if they only reach hypomania. Kitty, you're really affecting my light. and distracting me. That if they only reach hypomania, they may not even know they have an illness. However, if they have bipolar, you're guaranteed to have bi, which means two, both poles. So they're going to have some level of depression. Often people with bipolar 2, because there are multiple classifications of bipolar, bipolar 2 is compromised or comprised by a lot more depression and fewer manic episodes. The episodes are only hypomania, and they have a lot more depressive episodes. And oftentimes they may get misdiagnosed as depression because they seek help when they're depressed, and they don't, and sometimes those around them do not even notice the hypomania. They just think they're doing really well. However, the danger of ignoring the illness and misdiagnosing the illness is antidepressants given to a bipolar individual can trigger a manic episode. And untreated properly, bipolar 2 can eventually evolve into bipolar 1. Bipolar 1 bipolar 1 is diagnosed when a person has had one episode of verifiable mania. Because a person may go their entire life and only have one episode of verifiable full-blown mania. Or they could have it regularly. The levels not only change within the individual each time they get sick, but the quantity with which they experience episodes is different among individuals. My episode of full-blown mania, I had my first one right before I was about to graduate from college, and I ended up psychotic. And then 8 years later, 2 years ago now, I had another full-blown manic episode. So I am bipolar 1 with psychotic features. There is a risk in full-blown mania or full-blown depression, but more likely in full-blown mania to experience psychosis, which is a loss of touch with reality. Mania is more than well-functioning. In a manic episode, a person's mood is so high that they may act recklessly, they may spend all of their money, they may start to develop false beliefs that go in accordance with their mood state. If it is a mania, they may believe they're a famous author or have millions of dollars in the bank. They may up and quit their job and move. They may do all sorts of reckless and endangering things, and this type of behavior, their behavior when they're in mania, is extremely noticeable. No one can miss an individual in mania. They can go days without sleep and have loads of energy. They're extremely productive, but they're so sick at this point that they start projects and they can't finish anything because they can't think clearly. Extra spending, hypersexuality, exaggerated self-esteem, risk-taking, thrill-seeking, and many other destructive behaviors that are driven by the illness come into play. The person will talk really, really fast. They may be difficult to interrupt. They may not be able to sit still. All these are symptoms of mania, and if you know someone in a manic episode, or if you've ever seen it, it is very evident. They may dress in flashy, bright colors that don't match the weather. They're just very clearly not well. Again, it goes above and beyond elation. And if you are full-blown manic, you are a risk to yourself and others, to your life, and you risk becoming psychotic. Mania often requires hospitalization, and the person probably doesn't want to go because they don't realize that they're sick. They're quite enjoying it. Depression, we're far more familiar with, so I won't get too far into depression. But there's mild, moderate, and severe levels of depression. And every time an individual gets sick, they can be anywhere along the spectrum. They don't necessarily have to have severe, debilitating depression every single time. Another reason why bipolar may be missed. The types of bipolar. Bipolar 1, which I discussed. I love you. Good morning. The individual has periods of hypomania or full-blown mania and levels of depression. Demarcated, distinct episodes, demarcated by periods of normalcy. These periods of normalcy could last years, or they could last days. It depends on how rapid the individual cycles. And it gets worse, and you're more prone to rapid cycling the longer you go untreated with medication, because it is a brain disease. Just like schizophrenia is a brain condition. It is not a flaw of the individual. And there's bipolar 2. These individuals have never had a full-blown manic episode, but they have had diagnosed and observable hypomania along with depression, and or they have responded in a particular way to having been given antidepressant medication to treat what was considered to be depression, and it becomes clear to those trained to identify these disorders when someone responds in a particular way to an antidepressant, has a family history, and other symptoms are there that the individual is bipolar 2. There's also something called cyclothymia. In cyclothymia, the individual has chronic, low-level ups and downs along that baseline, and it tends to always be in either a low-level hypomania and a mild depression. They never really swing to the extremes. You're not helping. They never swing to the extremes. However, they rarely get relief. The episodes can go and go and go and go and go for years. And they are always on the coaster. There's a lot more symptoms and things that I could get into, but being that primary diagnosis of mine is bipolar 1 with psychosis, and I've covered other mental health pajama talks, I thought starting to get into bipolar a little bit would be good. Plus, my computer is down again. I've been up since 3, on 3 hours of sleep again, and I don't feel like doing my dishes or anything yet, so I'm in my pajamas. Carpe camera. Treatment for bipolar is medication. Some people don't use medication and they don't need to be on medication. It's debatable. I mean, often they suggest that anyone with bipolar just remain on medication because it is a brain disease. However, because there's such a period of normalcy in between and people have different extremes of episodes. A lot of people don't want to risk the side effects of medication and prefer to play it by ear. However, as I said, if you're left unmedicated, your symptoms can get worse. Every time you get sick, you could risk having a worse and worse disorder that happens more frequently. So going unmedicated also has a risk. There's a risk-benefits analysis that has to be done. In progressing, people use natural remedies. People use therapy in conjunction with medication or by itself. There are support groups. Family education is very good because it's hard to not compare emotion with what the individual is experiencing. The individual is more like they're under the influence of drugs they never took than having their own legitimate emotions. It's an illness, it's not a choice. And when someone is psychotic and talking off the wall things that don't make any sense, it's clear to tell that they're sick and they're not in control of their own mind and their own reactions based on what their mind is telling them. However, when a person is displaying what appears to be emotion, it's really easy to judge, to criticize, to blame, and to assume the person is in control and is making poor choices and is being a bad person, than recognizing that these are symptoms of an illness and the person needs treatment. The faster the better, and that they are not in control. I experienced a little of this, especially the first time I got sick. I was in college, and I got a lot of commentary on my behavior. I didn't notice it, I just noticed everyone was mad at me. And then I got psychotic. And then I wound up in a hospital. And people noticed the psychosis. This last time, I got really, really psychotic. I was extremely ill, and I was committed a couple of different times for the same episode. And I just kept getting floated from hospital to hospital for many months. It could have been treated far, far sooner. But it wasn't. It wasn't recognized. The people around me didn't understand what was happening. Even when I had become psychotic, they didn't understand what was happening for a long time, and nobody knew what to do. So I will get into psychosis at some point, and some actions you can take to help those you love. It took a good year to recover from the psychosis portion of my illness from this last episode. It doesn't need to be gone that far. Another important thing to talk about with bipolar is... switch legs. Yes, I do own other pajama pants. I just really like these. It's just a coincidence. I've changed. Is something called mixed episodes. It seems not possible that someone could have both mania, the very high, elated self-esteem, grandiosity, all of these things, and experience clinical depression at the same time, or vice versa. Clinical depression and the capacity to run around and be high energy and all of these things. Agitated mania, euphoric depression, dysphoric mania, but it's possible. Mixed episodes are actually quite common. I mean, think about somebody on a trip. Do they have a good trip or do they have a bad trip? You may experience the racing thoughts, flight of ideas, all of those things, the increased energy, and be extraordinarily depressed and upset and not in a good headspace, and now you are bundled up with energy, you never sleep, and you're highly irritable. That's not a good combination. If you are similarly not sleeping, running around, largely happy, but you have the irritability of depression, you may start fights. Your mania may take on a paranoid tone. Mixed episodes happen quite often. And they can happen in any of the bipolar types. I'm not sure about cyclothymia, but they're really destructive. They happen to be my forte, apparently. Every time I've wound up in the hospital, it's been because of a mixed episode. So I have a tendency to have those mixed mania. I've never been hospitalized for depression. Anything else noteworthy that I can think of this morning about bipolar? Causes, they're still looking into it. Genetics seems to play a role. There's nothing that the individual did. It's a brain disease. Like schizophrenia, it's considered in that class. It's not a character flaw. It's something they were born with. Not choosing to manage it as best they can. That might be a character flaw. But again, there's a cost-benefit analysis on every approach to treatment. So, there is my candor for the day. Don't know when this will upload. Don't know when it'll go out. My computer's broke down. And I should really take a nap, because stress, lack of sleep, predisposes an individual to have an episode, and I'm running on insomnia for a while. So, good morning, good night maybe, happy coffee, tea, soda, water, whatever you do to you. Bye, YouTube.